Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for coming to join us. You might have seen Scott's webinar a few months ago. And what struck us about that, I suppose, and an ongoing pattern in the ASI is while we do our best to bring awareness to important topics that impact the culture of spiritual leadership, there seems to be like a gap between the theory and the practice for all of us. Changing our behaviors is a whole other leap. And how do we begin to address changing our behavior? What does it look like when it impacts my life and when I need to change how I communicate and how I deal with conflict? And so this experiment today that Scott is bravely rising to, and some other volunteers, is a first attempt to see, can we make it more real? What's involved in changing our behavior? And so that's really kind of the ASI's sense or intention behind this modality today, this methodology today. And so, as per usual, I'm going to read out and post in the chat box our agreements for today. So welcome to this ASI gathering. We're very glad that you could come today to join us. These community webinars are here to support our members and friends and the mission of the ASI. We ask participants to stay connected, accountable, sensitive, and skillful when engaging today. We ask that you agree to create and maintain safe space for learning and growth. To that end, let's all refrain from marketing or self-aggrandizing while avoiding inflammatory or deliberately destructive comments. If you want to recommend a relevant or appropriate resource, please do so in the chat box. And we will remove participants who engage in harmful activity after one warning. Thank you so much for creating this community with us, showing up with presence, attunement, and self-awareness. And on that note, I'd like to hand you over to Scott.
Thank you all for being here. I'm going to jump right into the role play with some brave volunteers. There's no planned breaks, no breakout groups, no slides, but I do want to say to the role players, if you find that you need a break at kind of a key moment, feel free to just let me know and we will pause for a short bio break if you need it. But otherwise, I'm hoping to just roll straight through. I want to thank Cindy Levine for offering technical support. And yeah, I want to preface it by just saying that we know in the context of spiritual communities, organizations, that sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, other kinds of abuses of power happen regularly. And I think ASI can attest to how difficult it is to get the people primarily responsible for harm together with those primarily harmed for something like a restorative process. So that's why I want to focus on the very first stages of a restorative circle process, which we can consider preparation. So we're not bringing people together in this scenario. And I'll talk a little more about how it's structured, but I hope it can contribute by just illuminating the foundations of restorative circle process and demonstrating how to think about it, how to talk about it, how to present it to potential participants. So I want to thank our role players, Lilia as Katie, Deborah as Maria, Katie's support person, and Rick as Matt. And I just will post the scenario very shortly and we'll walk through it together. But I just want to remind our role players that you can pause the process at any time, ask a question, um, make a comment that feels urgent in the moment. Um, we're role playing. It's a fictional scenario, but it's very realistic. But I want to emphasize that it is fictional, and we're here to learn. And there will be pauses at key moments for your questions from the people that are just watching and not role playing, questions, comments. And Cindy, why don't we go ahead and post the scenario in the chat, and we'll go ahead and just read through that together. And I don't know if you got all of that in all at once. It looks like it's all there. So let's just read through it together. I'm calling this fictional organization Take It to the Cushion. And it's a spiritual organization whose primary mission and purpose is to elevate human consciousness through meditation and community. Two female students, Katie and Linda, have filed formal complaints about inappropriate sexual advances by a senior teacher of Take It to the Cushion. The formal complaints were filed after the women went directly to the teacher, Matt, and he expressed unwillingness to enter into mediated dialogue with the women. Matt offered an apology for any misunderstanding, but this was insufficient for Katie and Linda, who want to feel seen, heard, respected, and to recapture a sense of belonging in the community. Motivating factor for Katie and Linda is the agreement among many women in the community that women's voices and experiences are undervalued in the community and women are underrepresented in organizational leadership. They would like sexism and patriarchy addressed. The allegations were referred to the board, and after considerable debate, the board approved and funded a restorative process. Certain board members initially believed that Katie and Linda should take it to the cushion and that giving grievances more energy would detract from the spiritual mission and purpose of the organization. Grassroots pressure from the community was key in winning the support of the majority of board members. At present, it is unclear if Matt will be willing to participate, but the board felt that a restorative process would be helpful with or without his participation. A facilitator team has been hired and the process is ready to begin. Due to time constraints, we will focus on Matt, Katie, and Maria, Katie's support person, and one facilitator, myself. And I want to say a few things about the scenario that I've highlighted. Grassroots pressure. I want to emphasize that in this real world context of spiritual communities where the person or people who may have abused their power are in positions of power and authority, that and often unlikely to want to do something like this, to take ownership, that it is the community that can bring the pressure needed to make something like this happen, to talk about how it's impacted the organization, the community. The community is the third side in a conflict where, say, there's two parties in conflict. The third side is the community that can come in and interject some creativity and some incentive. So I feel like that's really important to highlight. With or without Matt's participation, can there be a process? The answer is yes. And to really go into that is beyond the scope of our session today. But we could consider a surrogate, somebody in Matt's seat who's not Matt, but can represent that presence, be that presence. The community could still benefit. Linda and Katie could still benefit from a process of being heard fully by the community, even if Matt is not there. And then lastly, this work, if it's rooted in restorative justice at all, will always have at least 2 facilitators. So in our scenario, there's only one, but there's huge benefits to having 2 facilitators who can complement each other in work like this. So in terms of your audience participation, if this were coming into a circle, there would be community members in that circle. I would be having a similar kind of conversation with at least 2 people from representing either the organization, like paid staff, or the community, or one from each of those sectors. And they bring a very powerful perspective to this, the big picture. How has this rippled out to affect the organization, the community? So I want to invite you as witnesses to kind of put that hat on and imagine, which I think you can imagine, harm like this happening in a spiritual community that you're a part of. Imagine how it might affect you, how it might affect the organization, the community. We want satisfaction and healing for individuals, for the organization, and the community. So I invite you to just notice what feels resonant and what doesn't. Notice what happens in your body as you witness the process. I think what's important is your felt experience of this, not trying to learn technical things, because that's not really what this is about. And there will be built-in pauses for your questions, not criticisms, not micromanagement, but what comes up for you, what you're curious about. And I really want to prioritize live comments as opposed to going back and reading something in the chat that, got posted 15 minutes ago. So just keep that in mind. So 3 different segments to our role play, and time for questions and comments after each. And at the end, I'm really hoping I'm gonna make sure we have some time for just open dialogue, discussion at the very end. So I'm going kind of fast. But once I start, I want it to be spacious. I want it to feel real, because this is about the opening stages. We don't have a dead, we don't have to get to a certain endpoint. It would be nice to get through my whole agenda, but we may not. So Cindy, yeah, if you will post the needs list from nonviolent communication, which is always a useful thing to just have access to, because this work frames the harm as unmet universal human needs. And then Cindy, if you could post the role play segments, and we'll just read through that really quick. And these meetings, 2 different meetings, I'm meeting with Matt, and then we're gonna pause, and then we'll go to a meeting with Katie and Maria, and then I'll go back to Matt to pick up where we left off. Those meetings can be envisioned as phone calls, as in-person, or Zoom. This work is very amenable to doing online, as I have learned. So we're going to start with, this is in the chat now, start with an enrollment conversation with Matt. So the very first conversation that Matt is having with one of the facilitators of the work. Obviously, a crucial part of the process. It's where he gets to learn about the process, and I want to describe it in some detail for him and for you all so that you get the taste of it. It's where he gets to decide if he wants to go further or if it's too scary, too uncomfortable. It's where I get to decide if he's a candidate for going further. I'm listening for some responsibility and the ability to express some shared reality around what happened. So regardless of what potential participants may have heard about the process, it's really important that they hear directly from the facilitators who can give them the best information. Then we'll go to what I call the pre-conference meeting with Katie and Linda. So I've already had the initial conversation with both of them, and the pre-conference is final preparation prior to bringing people together for the circle. So it goes deeper than the initial enrollment conversation. And we'll hear specifics about the behaviors and the harm. We'll fill out the scenario a little bit. And then I'll go back to Matt and I'll inquire into those specific behaviors, the harm, responsibility taking, and his overall willingness and ability to engage in the process. And what I'll model there might be a little more detailed than what would really happen in an initial conversation, but I want to model it, that part. So for Matt, this is an opportunity to ask questions, decide if he's willing to go forward. The next step would be the more detailed pre-conference meeting with me and his support person. With Matt, I want to find out if there's some shared reality of the events, the behaviors, the harm, some initial responsibility taking, openness to and capacity for a restorative mindset. With Katie, is she able to articulate the behaviors and the harm and uphold a restorative mindset rooted in shared understanding, repair, and not shame, blame, and punishment? I'm also looking to frame the harm as unmet needs. And in the end, does this feel like it could be a restorative process? Truly restorative. And my number one criteria is not causing additional harm if I bring them together. So thank you for your attention to that. Any burning questions from anybody before we start? I like to invoke a little mantra that one of my mentors used to say before we went into a meeting like this. She would say, "May there be healing," because that's what this is about. And for our purposes, may there be learning, because that's what this is about. So let's take a moment to just settle, and then I'll go to Matt, and we'll start. So Matt has already been informed by the board of Take It to the Cushion that there's a decision to engage facilitators and trying to put together a restorative process. And he agreed to have this initial conversation with me. So Matt, hello.
Hello, Scott.
Thank you for your willingness to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do a few things in our meeting today. I want to fully describe the restorative process, get your perspective on what happened, answer your questions, and then at the end, see if you're willing to take the next step in the process, which would be a deeper conversation, basically a trial run of what would happen in the circle. And that next meeting would also include a support person for you, as well as the second facilitator of the process.
And Scott, before we get rolling, speaking here is Rick. I've never done anything like this before, so feel free to correct me if I'm going off on some tangent that you don't want me to go on. But I'll actually try to voice things in ways that I've actually heard in real life situations from various teachers.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I will just say, because I neglected it earlier, just for everyone present here, these responses are unscripted, and there's no guaranteed outcome as to what's going to happen here. So thank you, Rick.
Mhm.
Matt. And so, Matt, I don't know your personal experience of what happened, but I'm assuming that it's been hard for you, that there's been some pain, some discomfort, and we'll talk more about that later on in our meeting today. But I just want to start by saying I'm sorry that, this has happened, and that, there hasn't been some resolution that, can bring people together and really support the organization going forward.
Thank you.
So, how are you feeling right now about even just having this conversation with me?
Oh, I'm fine. I'll have more to say as we get rolling, but I'm happy to have it.
Good, good. Thank you. So, a restorative process like we're going to be talking about is really an opportunity to come to some shared understanding of what happened, of what the harm is, and how it can be repaired, so that everyone can find some real resolution. And we do the preparation needed to really bring people together in a way that will be safe, that will be healing and truly restorative, where you can see each other, really hear each other in an atmosphere of respect and safety. And that's the job of the facilitators, is to really create that. There's some documents that I'll give you at the, as we go here, so that you can read those over before our next session, if you agree to have that. So the process is really designed to create that shared understanding and come to agreement on how to repair the harm without it being about shame, blame, and punishment. So that's a real theme here that I want to emphasize with you, that this is not about shame, blame, and punishment. It is the opposite. It's about some real restoration that can provide healing for individuals, rebuild relationships, and strengthen the organization and the community as a whole. So it does include support people. So I would strongly encourage you to have a support person with you in the circle, whose role it is simply to support you. Chime in when there's something that would feel supportive to say in the moment. It's a role that's very kind of fluid and organic, but it helps people show up fully. So if having someone there with you in the circle would help you show up fully, then I will strongly encourage it. I will strongly encourage it with Katie and Linda as well. I already know that Katie wants a support person in the circle with her, and I'll be meeting with them after I meet with you, have this first meeting with you. And the process is really built on the 5 R's of restorative justice. And I have a document that describes those that I'll share with you towards the end of our session. But the 5 R's are relationship, responsibility, respect, repair, and reintegration. And they really kind of form a container for how the work unfolds. And so those are a very key part of the process, and having a restorative mindset as we engage in this, and as you reflect on whether this is something that you want to do, that you are able to do. This idea of having a truly restorative mindset going into it is very important. And those 5 R's kind of give shape to what a restorative mindset really is. There's a heavy focus on relationships, repairing the harm to relationships. and also the impacts to the organization, how this has rippled out to affect the organization and the community built around the organization, which I understand is a very important part of the mission of the group. We frame the harm. I'm going to pause momentarily for your questions. I'll do a couple more things, and then I'll give you a chance to ask any questions if you have them at this point. We frame the harm as unmet universal human needs, Matt. And there's a document that I will share with you about that. That takes the finger pointing out, it humanizes the work. When I can speak to the harm to me as from a very personal experience of, I am feeling an unmet need for respect, for belonging, for being heard, understood. That doesn't point the finger at anybody, right? It just speaks from a very personal experience and a truth that can't really be argued with. So that's how we frame the harm in this work, to take a lot of the charge out of it and humanize it, take the finger pointing out. And then we have agreements that really just are basic to upholding respect, safety, nothing very surprising. And I also have a document that I will share with you on that at the end of our meeting. So, Matt, any questions, concerns at this point? I've got a little more I want to cover, just to filling out the process a little more, but I hope that just that much gives you a little bit of a taste for it, a little bit of the flavor.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of an open book, and I'm happy to have conversations with anybody who wants to have one. But I think that when people hear the details of what all this is about, they'll feel that a mountain is being made out of a molehill, and there really wasn't even much of a molehill. I'm well aware of the kinds of abuses that take place in spiritual communities. And, if on a scale of 1 to 10, if this is, I'm not even sure this is a 1, but I'm willing to discuss it with you. And I think perhaps what actually happened was misunderstood. But I'm willing to consider that it was inappropriate, and we can talk about that as we go along.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate your honesty. This has got to be real, and it's got to be meaningful for you as well as the others. And different perspectives are par for the course. What we're really going for, ultimately, if we do bring you all together, is some shared understanding of the different perspectives. Not necessarily total agreement, because that's just kind of not the way that we tend to be wired as human beings. We don't see the same thing the same way. We don't experience things the same way. We have our own lenses and yeah, biases even. So we're going to go deeper into that, Rick, later in our session. Let me just finish kind of outlining the process. And I think this next one is really key to what you just said. Responsibility taking is a cornerstone of the process. It's one of the 5 R's. And as this process has been framed for me and my co-facilitator, and overall, there is harm that has happened, and you are the one that is primarily responsible for that harm. So I'm going to be looking for some responsibility taking from you. At the same time, there may be other people involved here that are willing to take some responsibility for what happened as well. And so it's not all just on you. There's responsibility taking can go in multiple directions in something like this. You know, there may be things that just at the organizational level, at the community level, that contributed in some way, allowed it. Yeah, we'll talk more about that too as we go deeper into the work. So, Matt, once there's some shared understanding, if we get to that point, some shared understanding of what happened, some responsibility taking, then we move into the repair phase. And what that looks like in the circle is that everyone contributes suggestions for how to repair the harm. We do that as a brainstorm, gathering all the ideas. I might start with you. You know, what's one thing that you think would help repair the harm here? Because you know, you've been impacted too. And so, you know, this can really serve you and everyone else. And then once we gather all those suggestions, we step back and we look at the list and we try to prioritize maybe 3 to 5 very specific items that people can agree to, that will repair the harm. And we write an agreement around that whoever's responsible for doing those things agrees to do them. We put a timeline on it, and that's basically the end of the primary part of the process is then allowing people to go out and do the repair that they have agreed to do. And hopefully we get to that 5th R of restorative justice, which is the reintegration phase, where people can reintegrate back into their lives, back into the relationships, back into the organization and the community without lingering blame, shame, and resentment. So Matt, the process sets a pretty high bar. Clearly, it's a high bar. And the people that would be in this circle, we'd be looking at the 2 facilitators, you and your support person if you choose that, Linda and Katie and their support people or person, a couple of people representing the community at large, the organization or the community, and that would be it. And this is voluntary, right? You need to, everyone who's there needs to want to be there in order to repair the harm. There's no predetermined outcome. We really trust the wisdom of the circle. And you could trust me in this, that if people come together in the way I'm describing, and the facilitators do their job of maintaining safety and respect and upholding the agreements, that there is a synergy and there is a collective wisdom and support that arises in a process like this. The time commitment is we would meet again with the other facilitator, your support person, if you decide to go forward. That would probably be an hour-long meeting. And then the circle process, if we get to that point, probably I would plan for 2.5 hours with a break to really unfold, you know, what happened, what the harm is, and how to repair the harm. So Matt, that's basically the overview of the restorative circle process that I'm hoping to facilitate for you and the community.
Okay.
So what questions do you have at this point?
Well, I have a question, speaking as Rick. Do you want to make this a little bit more concrete and by informing the audience of our webinar today what this hypothetical scenario was supposed to have been, just so they know what we're talking about?
That comes next.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I don't have any questions at this point as Matt.
Great. Thank you, Matt. We're going to pause there, and we're going to come back to Matt after going to Katie and Maria. And I'm going to preface this meeting by just saying that I'm going to skip the more detailed, I would also in the final preparation meeting with Katie and Maria, I would also do a pretty thorough overview of the process. And I would want to give Katie a chance to really tell kind of her full story of what happened, give her a chance to vent, get some additional support with reframing things, if that's appropriate, really coach in the restorative mindset. But I'm going to skip all that for time purposes and just go straight into the specific behaviors that cause the harm, as well as what the harm is. And I'm listening for unmet needs and the ripple effects of the harm out into the community and the organization, as well as contributing factors that might be important in fully repairing the harm. So we'll pause after there is a sense of completion, and I'll ask for your comments. And yeah, I think that might be the best time to pause for group comments. So if you've got anything right now, just please hold it a little bit longer. I'm going to do a little time check. Okay. So I'm going to welcome Katie and Maria into the meeting.
Hello.
And where are you? Okay, there's Maria, and there's Katie. Okay, you're spread out on my screen. So thank you for being willing to meet again. And I just want to know how you're feeling about having this final preparation meeting today. Anything you want to say before we really get started?
Well,
Okay.
I'm definitely nervous how it will go because a lot of members of the community do not support me, and it really divides community into supporters and people that think that I'm just accusing Matt, and that makes me feel very insecure about the outcome and how it's going to go. But I'm grateful that this process is happening.
Mhm. Well, thank you for your courage, your willingness to be here and to carry it forward if we can. Maria, do you want to add anything? How are you feeling? Maria, you're muted, I think.
I personally am feeling relieved that we're at this place in the process, and feel energized to see what can be restored. And particularly Katie have more choices than she's had in the past.
Thank you. So this meeting is really intended to be final preparation for bringing you together with Matt and the community representatives. And a big part of this session is really getting some final clarity on the specific behaviors that caused harm and what that harm is. And so I'd like to ask about that right now. And Maria, this is an opportunity for you to really practice your role of supporting Katie when that feels timely and resonant. Your role is pretty flexible that way, and So I just really trust you to chime in when you feel like you need to. So Katie, and before we really get into it, Katie, I just want to remind you, you've read that document about the 5 R's. We talked about the restorative mindset last time. And I just want to make it really clear to you that this is not about shutting down your emotional bandwidth, inhibiting your ability to speak your truth. You can have a restorative mindset and be in this for repair and still have a full range of feelings and emotions. So I just want to make it clear that those are welcome here. And what's not welcome is, kind of the punishment, blaming, shaming mindset. And so it's just really important that we have clarity in this meeting about that. Okay, so it's a little bit of a, it may be a little bit of a balancing act for you, and this is our time to practice and, get you the validation that you need for your feelings and your emotions so that you can feel like you can come together with Matt and do that in a truly restorative way. So if that makes sense, if you'd be willing to just go ahead and just tell us about the specific behaviors that cause the harm.
Yes, sure. I just want to say, yeah, it's hard not to blame and shame, because then it's just quite confusing then what happened, because it felt really unpleasant and it's just hard to justify this. So what happened is, we've been gathering at the house of Matt for a while, and incredible, beautiful gatherings, and presence deepens, and then we went out to an event, separate from our practice. We just went out to the concert, several of the participants, and at the concert, Matt just told me, "You look like your energy is blocked, and you look like you're holding back." After he was sitting a little too close to me, I already felt uncomfortable with that, and he just said, "Let me clear your chakras," and he just put his hands on my back and started doing these movements, and that felt just strange. I felt like my body contracted more, and that felt inappropriate, but I just was confused, and I thought, okay, I don't know, because I trust him so much and I have so much respect for him. I actually thought, okay, maybe my chakras are blocked. So, and then after the concert, we went to his house where we usually have meetings, and we were 2 women there. Others didn't go. And then one of the women decided to leave. So I was also about to leave, and Matt offered for me to stay longer. And then he again started speaking about me holding back and me contracting, and my energy is not fully open. And again, without asking me, he put his hands on my heart chakra, and he said, "Let me just help you with that." And that's when I really felt uncomfortable, because we were alone, and I said, "Hey, it doesn't feel good." And he just said, "What? Like, why? Like, it's nothing bad. Like, what's going on with you?" Like, basically just told me that I'm projecting, and I'm misinterpreting, that he's just actually being helpful while my whole body was contracting and it did not feel right for me. And I left home and felt so weird, and I talked with Maria, and apparently I heard that a couple other women in community had similar experiences, so I got support that it needs to be addressed. So when I spoke about this with couple other members of community, and we communicated this to Matt. He just said that take it to cushion. It's just that this is your trauma, this is your story that you create. He denied that the energy was inappropriate, and basically I felt like I'm gaslighting, and it's very confusing for me, and I don't feel safe. So yeah, that's what happened.
Thank you. Yeah. Could you say a little more about what that contraction? We already talked about how we like to frame the harm in this work as unmet needs. And I shared that document with you when we first met about kind of some of the unmet needs that are considered universal for human beings. So when that physical contraction happened, you don't feel safe. Safety is a basic human need. What other unmet needs were present, maybe continue to be present for you?
Well, a big one is trust, because suddenly I cannot trust the person that before I trusted so much, and I received so much value from, and now I can't. Then it's a need of just being free and not having to be alert all the time and checking about danger. So just feeling free in my body, like not being afraid from hugs. Like I feel scared now to receive hugs from men, because I'm just confused about all this.
Yeah. Katie, has it rippled out to affect other relationships of yours? Your sense of belonging in the community?
Well, unfortunately, it's breaking community, divides community now, because some people accuse me at just projecting my stories, and they think that Matt is, this perfect awake person that cannot do any harm, and I'm just dividing community. And so yeah, and for me personally, I feel so disappointed to lose the trust in the person that I trusted so much, that delivered so much value to me, that now I have to stay away from, and I can't be anymore at the gatherings.
Okay, so this is still very present for you, it sounds like.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. Maria, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I will say, down the road, when Katie and I, when she first came to me, one thing that did come up is there had been other events, and both of us, but particularly Katie, was saying it would just be nice if there were some structures in place for transforming conflict, and some clear policies, like some of the other organizations that we're familiar with have in place, just acknowledging that these things happen.
Is there not something like that in place already with Take It to the Cushion? A code of conduct, for example, is there anything like that?
Maybe
It's very loose. Yeah, go ahead.
some of the board members will know better than I. I think that it's been kind of on the back burner, just hasn't been implemented for sure.
Okay, yeah, is that your understanding too, Katie?
Yes, that's what I just wanted to say. It's not super clear because we're talking about oneness and, like very clear boundaries. It's not about boundaries as much as, oneness and unity.
Mhm. The code of conduct, or the
The
overall
the code of
vibe.
conduct is not very emphasized because it's, we're dissolving boundaries of ego and yeah, so we just not, it's not communicated very clearly, the codex, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Could you say a little more about how it's divided the community? You mentioned that at the beginning of our session, how there's certain people that are, that are challenging you and wanting you to just drop this, it sounded like. Could you just say a little bit more about personally the feelings and the unmet needs that arise out of that for you?
Very painful. What they say is that, right, it's, Me Too movement now. You're just joining this women that complain against men just because they're hurt and they have unhealed traumas. Um, so just go deal with yourself and heal your traumas. It's not a big deal what happened, and why do you overreact? So I feel belittled. I feel made really insignificant in all of this. And to be honest, because I heard from other women similar things happening, like I wonder how these women feel too. So I don't want this to happen to other women. When it's just brushed away, like not a big deal, take it to the cushion.
Right. So we know Linda has experienced similar things, and
Yes.
we're also hoping to have her in the circle. Yeah. So let me ask this: are there ways in which organizational culture, structure, norms may have contributed to this in any way?
Um, it's hard to say. Like we are a hugging culture. We usually meetings begin with open hugs, and I feel sad that now I feel not safe hugging people. But it's yeah, I would say it's a touch positive community of hugs. So maybe that contributed, but yeah, I don't like that because hugs are beautiful. Like it's about how do you hug? Can we hug from the really heart open space, or do we hug the body?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Katie. How does it feel when someone says, "Oh, just take it to the cushion"?
Unfortunately, confusing because that's what we're trained to do here, take full responsibility for our feelings. So, like, I don't want to blame, I don't want to project. And at the same time, I feel so hurt and I feel angry about what's happening. And I feel protective of other women. So um, it it feels like a spiritual bypassing.
Mm. Mhm. Okay. Yeah, Katie, it sounds like you're really wanting to break the cycle and change the dynamic so that this doesn't happen
Yes.
again to anyone else.
Yeah, I would
And
love
I,
safe environment in our group meetings where we all feel free and ourselves and safe.
yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. So because this restorative circle work really aims at a high level of repair in the relationships, as well as repairing the other things that need to be repaired, I'm wondering if there are aspects of Matt, qualities of Matt that you appreciate and that you might be willing to share with him if we're able to bring you together.
Well, definitely. That's why I've been going to these gatherings because he's so present and so clear. He asks amazing questions and he's really able to awaken the presence in the participants. of our gatherings, and he's very wise and charismatic. And maybe that's part of the problem, that people open up too much, but he delivers so much value to community.
Mm. So you can really see, sounds like to me, you could really see his fullness and everything that he brings. And, your contributions are also towards fullness, right? And seeing the shadow, seeing what might be unconscious. And I just so appreciate your courage in bringing this forward.
Yes, I would love to help him see his shadow, because yes, he is charismatic and amazing, but there is a shadow and there is a misconduct there. It's obvious to me. It's obvious to some other women.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
And Katie, I have to say that it may not be as obvious. It's not as obvious to him. And one of the things that I've learned in doing this work is needing to make space for different perspectives, because that's just the way it works. So we need Matt, if he's going to do this work, to have some shared reality of what happened. Otherwise, I won't bring you together. Some shared reality of what happened, some understanding of what the harm is to you. He'll have the opportunity to speak to how he's been impacted. And yeah, so we're going for a process that will be satisfying for everyone involved. And the responsibility taking part is really key, right? It's clear that what has brought us together are some specific behaviors that have caused harm. And Matt is the one primarily responsible for that harm. I'm also wondering if there are things that you can take responsibility for that may have contributed in any way to how this has played out. And we ask that of others in the circle too, the people representing the organization, the community. If there's just ways in which the community, the organization, the culture has contributed here, because it's never just one person in a vacuum. There's context, right? So there's no pressure on you, Katie, to take any responsibility. It's a very open question for you.
Thank you. What I see immediately is I think I just projected, like I made Matt into my father figure in a way. This incredible, perfect, benevolent figure, and I forget that he's a man also, and where I could have been more clear with my boundaries, I wasn't, because of that projection of just expecting only good from him, this unconditional trust. And that's why the question of a boundary is not even present that much.
Yeah, thank you. So as we close our meeting today, our final preparation, what would you like to see come out of this process? If we can bring you together with Matt and Linda and the community representatives, what would you most long for?
I would like to be seen in my experience, and I would like to be acknowledged, and other women also, how it was for us. And I would love to see the gathering still happen and the community to continue. But I would love for Matt to take responsibility for this different aspect of him that he's not aware of, and just be aware of it, and that we all can feel safe and continue this beautiful spiritual work.
Yeah, beautiful. And going further in the process is really contingent on my next meeting with Matt and his willingness to go forward. But if he is, do you feel ready at this point to come together with Matt?
If I have my support with me, yes.
Do you have any specific requests for Maria on how she might best support you in the circle?
I would like her to, I guess there's a fear of being ganked on, it was being blamed. And even though I understand that you're a mediator and you're very neutral, I appreciate you very much. But for her to really empathize with how I feel. So that's what she has been doing already anyway. So yeah.
And I'm happy to be with you in this, Katie.
Thank you.
Also impressed by your courage and compassion that you have for everybody that's been impacted.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And I guess my final comment, and we'll be in touch. I'll let you know how it plays out after I meet with Matt. I guess the one thing I would really ask your trust in is that myself and the other facilitator, our primary objective, or not our objective, but one of our primary criteria is that there be no more harm in this process to anyone. So we won't bring you together as a group if we don't feel like everyone in that group is really able to show up in a truly restorative way. And that's the beauty of having another facilitator. If I'm missing something, they can chime in, or anyone in the circle can say, hey, this doesn't feel good. We need to pause here. And then we can pause and we can step back and we can see if there's a way to get it back on track if it gets off track. But if it starts to feel like it's getting messy, it's getting out of control, more harm is happening, we end it. We end it. So that's my promise to you. Beyond that, there's lots we cannot control. And there's no guaranteed outcome when we do this. But you've got the supporting material. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
So thank you both. So at that point, we'll hit the pause button, and I really want to invite questions, comments. Let's first start with Katie and Maria, if there's anything in that round that you want to ask about.
Scott, you're open to the group here?
And I want to open it up to the group as well. Yeah.
Yeah, just to recap that the first meeting is separately to hear each one of us, and then the second would be potentially bringing us together.
The way I'm kind of looking at the preparation as two meetings. There's an initial conversation, and then there's the pre-conference meeting, which is the going deeper, basically a trial run, which is what we just modeled, and then coming together.
Thank you.
So yeah, let's open it up to the whole group.
Annie has her hand raised there.
Okay. Oh, I see that.
Yourself?
Annie.
There you go. It took me a little bit. First of all, I really was absorbed in the whole thing. It's very nuanced, and the premise that you created, that it's not a matter of pointing the finger, and the way you approached Matt, I thought it's a very wise approach because he felt defensive. I thought Matt did a great job. There was a defensiveness there, but I could see that could soften over time with that approach. And also, I thought it was great that it wasn't like a highly egregious act. You know, it wasn't something really, I mean, it was a subtle thing. He placed his hand on her heart. And I thought that was a very wise choice in terms of modeling, because there was a breach of boundary. And obviously, he kind of does have major blind spots and does not understand. So I thought it was a very helpful representation of probably what takes place in these scenarios. Yeah, that's all I want to say. And also, just as an aside, I've had to watch videos about child abuse because I work in the school system and at the Y. And they have all these codes in place, you know, where you can't be alone with a child. You have to make sure there's another adult. And it's interesting, in the spiritual field, it's so much more amorphous. And usually the spiritual teacher is seen as perfect and impeccable. And that's a slippery slope. So I thought all of that was really shown in this scenario. I don't really have a question other than if you have a comment about what I just said. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. Let's keep it going. And yeah, if you can raise a hand, I think that's the best way to get seen. If you can do that electronically, or manually, if that's the way you can do it. Jeff.
Okay. Yeah. I guess the question that comes up for me, Scott, is given that this is a role play, do you have any perspectives on how, you know, I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, it doesn't actually play out like this, given that you're dealing with real people and not people who are, you know, they don't have, none of the role players have emotions involved in this. It didn't happen to them. And I'm just wondering if anything jumped out at you where you were like, oh no, that like that person is being way too calm compared to what might truly happen, or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, usually by the time it gets to the phase where facilitators have been hired and I'm having an initial conversation, you know, Matt he's agreed to at least that much, you know, to having that conversation. He, you know, it might be more realistic to imagine that he wasn't. You know, we can imagine that. And I already had one meeting with Katie and Maria to kind of prepare them for the next step. So I didn't find anything. I mean, I think we have yet to really get the defensiveness from Matt, and I hope we'll bring that out when I go back to him after this little pause for some questions. But yeah, we know that it's often not going to line up in a restorative way. And when it doesn't happen. It's that simple. We don't pretend. We don't pretend that we're in a restorative process if we're not. And that's on me as the facilitator to say, no, this doesn't feel restorative.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks. Can we take one more and then jump back in? Is there anything in the chat? No. Okay. Well, that's beautiful. I hope we'll have some time to open it fully back up again. We will.
Almasta wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to raise her hand. So Almasta could just unmute herself and say something if she wants.
Please do. Are you declining, Almasta? We don't hear you. You're muted. Okay, it looks like, all right. Thank you. So coming back to Matt. So Matt, I'd like to focus on some specifics now. And we're operating under the assumption, right? This process came together based on some of your behaviors that caused harm. And I just want to say again, Matt, this is not about shame and blame and punishment. It's about trying to get to some shared understanding of what happened and make repair as best we can. But I'm wondering if you can tell me from your perspective what those behaviors were. And I know you've heard something from Katie and Linda. They came to you, as I understand it, expressed some of this, asked for a mediated dialogue. So I'm pretty sure you have a sense of where they're coming from. And I want to know where you're coming from in terms of your understanding of the harmful behaviors. So if you could just kind of lay those out for me briefly.
Okay. So our Sangha, our group is very much like a family. We know each other very well. There's a lot of perfectly innocent affection. People hug each other and stuff like that. And I think, maybe some people think I'm perfect or incapable of making mistakes, but there is no perfect person. But essentially, in my experience, I'm not a person. I'm the impersonal consciousness, and I don't really feel like I'm the doer of actions. The actions just takes place spontaneously through some kind of divine impulse. And so I really don't have any inappropriate intentions, but I can see how I might have been misconstrued as having some. And
Can you give me
I
one
th-
specific behavior that
well, like for instance, Katie said that I, touched her inappropriately by placing my hand on her spine or on her chest, and that was really spontaneous, and I could perceive that there was some blockage, and I, felt that I could help clear it, and so I did that, and but it's important to kind of teach to the level of consciousness of the student, um, and I realized going forward that I'll have to be more constrained or more careful so as not to be misunderstood. Because from where I was coming from, there was really nothing to be upset about or concerned about. My intentions were not inappropriate.
Okay, yeah, great. Let me just pause you there, Matt. So your intentions were one thing, and the impact is another. So can you speak to how Katie was left feeling, what the impact was to her, the harm, as we call it in restorative justice? What do you recall hearing from her, or what is your sense of her perspective? Her perspective.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to belittle her perspective, but the question is, did she accurately assess my perspective or my intentions?
That's not that's not my question.
Okay.
I want to know, I want you to put yourself in her shoes and articulate for me, if you can, just to the best of your ability, what she was left feeling, what she said, what you imagine she was feeling, what she was needing, wanting in the moment.
Yeah. No, I understand that she was upset and perhaps disillusioned and confused. And I'm sorry about that. I didn't want that was certainly not my purpose to make her feel that way. And as I said, I'll just really have to be much more careful going forward. And if Katie wants to have a group meeting with you and me and the other one, I forget the other one's name.
Linda.
Linda, right. I'd be happy to do that, and perhaps we can talk it out, and maybe we can all learn something, through that process.
Yeah. So when you have some awareness that you want to change some of your behaviors, I mean, why is that? What's at the bottom of it? I'm wondering, I'm still wanting to kind of know if you can put yourself in Katie's shoes and kind of learn from her what she's experienced in this and what
Yeah.
she's expressed. There's harm that's happened.
Right.
And it's not just disillusionment. And it's important, if I do bring you together, Matt, that you're really able to articulate the specific behavior and the harm that it caused.
Yeah.
So, and let's frame it as unmet needs. So
Who's unmet needs?
let's frame it as Katie's unmet needs. So what do you think she might have been needing in the moment that wasn't met when you touched her without permission?
My
And
perspective was that she needed some heart opening, and that's why I did that. But perhaps I misperceived the situation, and perhaps that might have been a more skillful way of helping facilitate that heart opening for her.
okay. And if I were to suggest that the harm to Katie is in the form of a lack of respect for her boundaries, for kind of permission, kind of a violation of safety, that she was left feeling unsafe, that there was a violation of respect. She has made it clear that she has a lot of respect for you, and some of that's been lost.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry about that. I mean, I have respect for her too, and and my role has been to become a spiritual teacher, and I want to be an effective one. So, perhaps what I can learn from all this is to be more mindful of the impact of my actions, and be more constrained, as I said earlier, be more careful lest they be misconstrued. Because, I really feel like I'm coming from a right place in terms of my intentions, but it seems to me that they were misconstrued. And but I'm willing to talk more about it. Perhaps I have some blind spots that I need to look at, even though I'm not a person.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a good place to pause. And I think just open it up. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rick, Lilia, Deborah. Great role playing. Kara, I see a hand. Let's just jump in.
Yeah, I'm so curious as to how you handle the I'm just misunderstood vibe that keeps kind of surfacing in different language, and how you would pursue that, since that's probably not a great place to go into a circle meeting with.
It's not. Thank you for the question. I saw the comment in the chat. I just want to read it real quick. Matt seems to have no empathy or interest in Katie's feelings. This is not uppermost in his mind for sure. Yeah, Matt's not an easy case. And he did that on purpose. Thank you. Because I think, based on my preparation meeting with Rick, that this is realistic. This happens.
Matt's an innocent little Boy Scout compared to some of the teachers that I've encountered, believe me.
So, let's all just think through this together, how challenging it would be to work with Matt in this context. I don't think it's impossible. I think it would take patience. It would take probably a couple of preparation meetings beyond this initial one, to really inquire as to what's underneath the defense, if it feels like defensiveness, what's underneath it. Can I coach Matt in a fuller view of spirituality and the humanity, the feelings and needs that we have as human beings that don't go away just because we have had an enlightenment experience? Can I do that? Probably not, but maybe a team, maybe the community that knows Matt could come together, give him the support he needs without Katie and Linda involved, because we don't want to harm them anymore with the lack of empathy and the minimizing of the impact to them. Catherine McGinnis.
Hi. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. I work with James O'D for 10 years. I was just reading these books this morning. You probably know James, eh?
A little bit.
Yeah. And as I actually highlighted something this morning before this class, and I went, oh my God, this is what you guys are talking about. So it will only take a minute to read it, and I'd love to share that if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. He says, speaking about the Western mind, we are called into consciousness, which itself must be developed into a higher knowledge of our sacred trusteeship for all matter, all energy that we interact with in the form of matter. And more than that, that we are called to recognize our responsibility to clean up when we pollute, whether the pollution goes into the rivers or flows to our own minds. So the word energy really kind of spoke to me on what you're speaking about. And it is hard to believe that spiritual workers don't understand the simple energies that we have in our body, and that they're permitted to actually hold these spots where they can put their hands on people and yet have no clue of what they're doing in not getting permission from the other person. I just find it stunning. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, it's a blind spot. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Katie used that phrase, blind spot. What you read to me, it reminds me of the really important way that the importance of talking about the R of responsibility in a really full and heartful way, and just how, and this would take the right context to really be able to talk with somebody about it, but just the way that taking responsibility is so liberating. If it's not about shame and blame and punishment, but the act of taking responsibility is just so liberating and scary, very possibly. There's a book out there that I'm really inspired by these days called Mediating Dangerously. And he talks about the dangerous questions that we can ask as mediators. And it's when the dangerous questions are the deep ones. What are you afraid of? What's blocking? So I think we would probably need to go into some dangerous territory with somebody like Matt to really bring him out, soften him, allow him to be vulnerable, to coaching someone in empathy. I mean, that's a big ask. That's challenging, but this is our context. So and I see the time is going. Cindy, if you could go ahead and post the resources in the chat so that people have those. I want to leave you with some additional resources, and there's a couple of raised hands. Lilia, and I'm not sure who else. But if you have a hand raised, please go ahead.
I just want to say thank you so much, Rick, because this is such a perfect example of I'm not a person. This is just happens through me. This is so typical. And by the way, the role that I played is something that I witnessed in my community recently. So it's a very real situation. So I actually have a quick question to Rick. What do you think can be done? Because you witnessed spiritual teachers even in worse situations. What do you think?
It's a good question. I was saying this to Scott the other day, which is that I can't even think of an example where a teacher has really been vulnerable and honest and admitted that they were wrong. There's every single situation, they're either secretive about it or they claim that they're a lifelong celibate and wouldn't, possibly do such a thing, even though they're doing it like crazy behind the scenes, or like I was saying, they claim not to be the doer, or that God is the doer, and they're just totally innocent, or that there is no such thing as morals. Morals are all relative, and anyone who thinks they're important is an ignorant monkey. I heard a teacher use that actual phrase. He was also drunk while he was speaking, and so it goes on and on. And maybe Scott can encourage us by telling us that there are some examples of teachers who have really changed. But I can't think of one. I think sometimes when teachers have come under a great deal of criticism, and I can think of one famous teacher, they have cleaned up their act a little bit, like no longer allowing dirt to be sold that they have walked on and things like that. But really undergoing a profound and significant personality change, haven't seen it. And one other problem I'll throw in really quickly is that some teachers seem to have the attitude that they're done or finished. And whereas I think it's good to have the attitude that we're all beginners, that, and that they're compared to what is possible in terms of personal and spiritual development. We're all just getting started, even if we're the Dalai Lama or Ramana Maharshi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lilia. Thank you, Rick. Yeah. The only encouragement I can offer is not from any experience that I've had, but just that if there's any group of people that can do this, it's you all. And it's this group's mission that can make this happen. I think it's part of our evolution as a species and as human beings. And I wanted to see if Jack had any kind of closing remark. And then Jack, actually, maybe let me walk through the resources really quick with folks, and then we'll give you the last word. So I referred to some of these documents in the role play. There's the 5 R's overview. There's a distinction between active peace circles, which is my process, and restorative justice, the agreements, there's basic stages. There's my website, which includes a very full demo that I did with a group of volunteers, including Cindy and Deborah, who are here today. And the PDF gives you all the links that you need. So as a next step, if you want to do a deep dive, I would recommend that demo. The Zare Institute is a resource on restorative justice. And there's the link to the earlier session I did for ASI, and my email address. So
I think that Renata can email those to all the participants later on so that you don't have to scramble to get them all right now.
So Jack, closing word.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Deep bow of gratitude to Deborah, to Lilia, Scott, and Rick. Thank you, Scott, for seeing that this step was the next thing we had to do. We will send out these resources with the link. Good idea. Also in the, with the ASI current strategies and procedures, we have a complaints form. And also, I have to concur that our experience is the same as Rick's. Even though we speak to the student when there is a complaint filed against an ASI member, and we speak to the teacher, spiritual leader, we have never found anybody who was actually willing to go to a mediation where they would be in the one group with the student, teacher and student together. No leader has ever wanted to do that. So we have a way to go. And part of it, of course, is our own needs, learning needs as the ASI, to find out how could we be more subtle. And as Jeff said there in an interesting comment, it's like there's an extra layer within the spiritual sector. And we found this too with peer support. When we were setting up peer support, we explored all kinds of, from not-for-profit to corporate models to educational models of peer support. And it's like, it's still not going to hold spiritual leaders. We have a particular culture. And it's the same with this. We're going to have to find methodology drawing from best practices, but take it to that level that's deeper. Because we have, yes, states of consciousness where you actually lose touch with duality. Does that mean that a teacher who has not yet gone back into duality and sees the values of the dual and the outside of all of it in the one spectrum, if they can't see both at the same time, maybe they shouldn't be teaching? I don't know. I certainly spent a couple of years there not being able to participate fully in life. But I had, I'm a woman. I had different needs going on that didn't exploit students, luckily, that I know of. So it's random. When you're in that place of where your consciousness is not embracing duality, if you're attached to that space, you will see it as, yes, it's ignorance. You will see, if you're attached to that, I don't want to go into the place of suffering. I worked too hard to get out of it. And so this defensiveness, this denial is very strong in the culture of spiritual leadership. For many reasons. It's not to blame spiritual leadership, it's for us to explore what is it that catches us in our lens of perception, where we really do believe that our impact is an egoic issue for the student. That's a place where we can get really stuck. So let's see what we have to do. We'll just take it step by step, but these kind of webinars I'm hugely grateful for, because this is where we can learn on the ground and share ideas from each other. So thank you for showing up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you especially to our 3 volunteers and Scott for holding space. And we will catch you downriver. Thank you.